Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the WordPress loop, which is essentially a loop that's going to be going through a bunch of our posts. Like, so we're able to specify what posts we want to go through, and when it goes through like each and every post, what information we want to pull from that post in order to display on our page. So the WordPress loop is kind of a powerful thing, and there are various articles and things like that written about it. There are various resources that we can use to actually go to find out more information about like what we can and can't do inside the loop. Specifically, if you go to, well, I would say that probably this second link is a little bit better to just understand what the loop is from a tutorial point of view. So it kind of just talks about it and kind of explains basically what this loop is about, and it gives a little bit of code to kind of talk about that. Now, the one that's on the WordPress developer website is a little bit more techy as far as like how it reads it, but it is very helpful when it comes to just using it as a reference. So once you kind of know a little bit about what the loop does, then you can kind of go back into this one, and you can get just kind of a list of the different things. Like, for example, this list of what can the loop display, and this is a list of conditionals to figure out specific information about the post that you're dealing with. So again, this one's a little bit better as a reference. The WP beginner one is a little bit better as a tutorial. So both of those are on there. So I'm going to stretch your memory a little bit to the beginning of the semester. And we kind of talked about this database from the perspective of JavaScript. So in JavaScript, what we did was we set up a bunch of variables. Like we see these, where we have this var, that's a variable. And we have, in this particular case, we have a variable for the head, a variable for a paragraph. So we have this head1, it's equal to, like, this is the first title. We have para1, and it's equal to this Lorem Ipsum here. So we have head1, para1, head2, para2, head3, para3. So we have these 6 variables here. Again, each one starting with var and then the variable name. We have these 6 variables here, which is holding a kind of rudimentary database of information, where each post, we're going to call this a post, has a title and a paragraph of information. So what we did was, after talking about a lot of different ways of kind of setting this up in JavaScript, what we ended up with was we had a loop, which in JavaScript is called a while loop, which is able to go through the different posts, and it's able to pull certain information from that specific post. So it's able to pull like the heading, and it's able to pull the paragraph. But we have this loop here, and in this case it's called a while loop, where basically between these curly braces here, it is running this loop over and over and over again until we tell it to stop. And it's stopping where we have this index is less than and is not length. Basically, it's saying that it's going to stop once it runs out of posts to go through. And what it's doing inside of these curly braces over and over and over again is it is writing out the heading or the title, and then it's writing out the paragraph itself. So even in JavaScript, like, we have this way of going through a database, and it's going through each of whatever we set up as far as our information here, and it's pulling information specifically from what we're calling a post in that case. So conceptually, even though the syntax is going to be different, conceptually this is the same thing we're going to be doing in WordPress. In WordPress, we're going to have oops. In WordPress, we're going to have a series of posts, and we're going to categorize those posts with different categories actually in the dashboard. Then what we're going to do is on the on our home page, as well as our individual category pages, we're going to pull those posts. We're going to pull this post called 1, a post called 2, or whatever like that. Whatever the posts are actually called, we're going to pull them into this page. Now, what we're going to pull from those posts, we might be pulling just the title, we might be pulling the date, we might be pulling the paragraph or the photo, and we want to make sure that it looks just like we kind of plan in our design. So, at least for my design, something Photoshop. I had a JPEG of this somewhere, but so at least for my design, I have this. This is the older one. Sorry. Here, I'm just going to pull up the HTML itself. Yeah, there we go. So, at least for my design, I have a series of posts which are basically represented by the top, which is going to be the latest news. I have a series of posts represented by features, series of posts represented by editorial, series of posts represented by events. So, all of these are posts. And when it comes to handing this off to the client at the end of the project, I would expect the client to actually build out posts here, and I would give them instructions as far as depending on where you want to set it up. You're going to have to set up the different categories over here. So once they actually fill out the post information, it's going to have these different buckets here, these different sections, where it's going to pull posts just from that one category and only pull the information that I, as the developer, am telling you. So, for example, maybe I'm just pulling the title here. Maybe I'm pulling what's called the excerpt here. Where here I need to pull the date information. For a lot of these, I'm pulling the actual photos. So I, as the developer, am telling it what to pull and then where to actually put that information. And again, once I actually hand this off to the client, they're the ones that are actually filling out this form to create the posts and categorize them in a specific way. But yeah, like I said, it still kind of works off the same principle that we talked about at the very beginning of the semester with the JavaScript, where we're running through a loop, but the syntax is itself going to be a bit different. Any questions about that so far? Okay. So, where we left off last time, just to kind of go through a little bit of a quick review. So, we installed the _s starter theme. The _s starter theme gives us a whole bunch of different files here, a lot of different files, and we make sure that when it comes to our WordPress installation, this is the root of my WordPress installation. You can kind of tell where it says WP admin, WP content, WP lot includes. This is the root of my WordPress. Where I put any sort of themes that I'm installing, I go into WP content. Really, when it comes to WordPress, you don't want to edit anything outside of WP content. Everything you're going to be doing should be inside WP content. So we're in WP content, and that's broken out into a few different categories: plugins, themes, and uploads. So plugins is where the plugins go, uploads is where the uploads go, as far as the media, the images and things like that. You don't have to necessarily put in the images manually into uploads. I mean, as far as like FTP, you don't have to FTP the images over. But anything that you do inside the media library for the dashboard, if you're in the dashboard and you're editing anything as far as the media library, whether it's like inside one of these posts or there's a direct link to the media library in the left menu, you can manage everything in here. Whenever you put in images, PDFs, Word documents, like, whatever it is, all of that is going to go inside of this uploads folder, again, inside the WP content. So again, no reason to edit anything outside WP content. But plugins where the plugins go, uploads is where the uploads go. Themes is, as you might guess, where the themes go. So here we have a different folder for each one of our themes. Again, we have the 2015, the 2017, and the 2016 themes, which come out of the box with WordPress. When we installed our _s WordPress theme, we get a folder that has a bunch of different files in it. So, believe it or not, they're giving us the minimum number of files and things in order for us to get started without trying to do too much work and theming for us automatically. If we look at the 2015, 2016, and 2017 theme, there's already a distinct style to that. The underscores is pretty much a blank template. So even though it's a blank template, it still gives us all these files here because we need some foundation to work off of. So it's kind of like, if we're doing a painting, yes, we want a blank canvas, but we still actually need the canvas itself. We still need the easel. We still need the palette and everything like that in order to actually get started with it. Yes, I'm comparing programming to painting. It's fine. But we still need basically these mostly trimmed down files in order to have something to work off of. Now, last week, the only ones that we really touched were the header and footer files. So what we talked about with the header and footer files is that we were a bit aggressive with how we updated the header and footer. Basically, if we take a look at our static HTML, so this is my static HTML. I have an HTML file for the index or the home page. I have an HTML file for the article. So again, this is what the home page looks like, and this is what one of the article pages looks like. So if I take a look at the code for the index page, we're assuming that the index and the article page look pretty much the same until you get down to the actual content. So the code, which is the same from my index to my article page, is pretty much all of this down to where we actually get started with the content itself. So we have this div with the ID content, we have this div with the ID content inner, this center column thing, but all the stuff that's inside of this double div as far as content and content inner is the thing that is specific to that page. So all of this is starting with my home content, beginning with the slider at the very top. And if we take a look at my article page, again, all of this is exactly the same until we get down to this double div with the content and the content inner. But here is where the article actually starts, with the article image and the title and blah, blah, blah. So when it comes to what I'm defining as a header, the common code between all my pages, it's going to end right here. So this is where the common HTML ends for my header. Right after my header is where the content for that specific page exists. Blah, 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 blah. Until we get down to something which, again, is going to be common in the footer for all the pages. Now, I'm actually using the footer tag, but that's completely arbitrary. What I'm really defining as a footer is the code which is going to be common in all of my pages. So the code which is going to be common in all my pages is this content here where it says join us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, as well as the ending div tags for the content and the content inner, as well as the ending body tags and the ending div for the wrapper. So all of this content here is what is my common HTML between all of my pages, and this is what I'm defining as my footer. And everything, including the double div as far as the content inner, all of this is my common content for the header itself. So considering that information, what I do is in the header PHP, I'm copying, and again, we're a little aggressive as far as like just copying and pasting just about everything and replacing everything that was here before. The only exceptions were here at the very beginning, and this is the header PHP file that it came in the underscores as. Here we have some comments in here that talk to us about what this file is. We don't have to get rid of that, but we don't have to keep it as well. They're comments. So it doesn't really affect anything technically, but it gives us as human beings a little bit more information so that we can know what this page is all about. There's a couple of things here and there. Wherever we see this angle bracket and question mark in PHP, that means that we're looking at PHP code. So by this point, like you can kind of just like read like, oh, this is HTML, this is HTML, this is HTML. Like wherever we see this angle bracket and some sort of HTML tag. Wherever you see these dollar signs, you're typically thinking jQuery. So you can kind of recognize like certain languages like as they kind of mix together. With PHP, hopefully your code editor is colorizing this a little bit better than mine, but at the very least you can kind of recognize like wherever we see this angle bracket question mark in PHP, this is where we see PHP code, and it always ends where you have a question mark and angle bracket here. So everything between this beginning question mark and angle bracket and this ending question mark and angle bracket is the actual PHP code. And if we took a look at this page, even if we looked at the view source, we would not see question mark PHP. We would see what PHP is actually replacing in this place. So in this particular case, it's just simply defining the fact that it's English. And where's the title? Oh, that's right, it's in the head. Oh yeah, and in here in the body, we have some PHP code. Again, we can recognize the angle bracket question mark, the question mark and angle bracket. And again, if we take a look at the view source, we're not actually going to see question mark PHP in body class. If we took a look at the view source or the inspect element when it's live on the website, and we take a look at this in the browser, where this is replaced with the actual code. So it's replaced with a code that will say something like class equals blah blah blah, and it'll have a whole bunch of classes like for this body. Now, like I said, we were pretty aggressive as far as like copying a lot of stuff over from our static HTML to our header PHP file. But we did not change as far as like these comments. We kept like, some of this PHP stuff the same. One of the most important things is that here in the head of our HTML, so not the header, but the head of the HTML, where we typically have meta tags, where we typically have the link tags, the script tags, we have this line right here. This line right here, where we start off with angle bracket question mark PHP and we end with question mark angle bracket. The PHP code here is just simply WP underscore head, parentheses, and a semicolon. What this is doing is it's adding in a bunch of content that we actually need for WordPress to really do its thing, for WordPress to add in any plugins that we have, any extra information as far as like CSS and JavaScript files and things like that. We absolutely need to have this line in our head for our header.php. So we definitely didn't want to replace this, but there were some other things that we replaced and we just kind of got rid of. But most of the rest of this is the stuff that's from our static HTML. What we define as the header, which is everything to and including this content. So all of this, as far as my static HTML, this is what I'm defining as a header. Now, a couple other things. Wherever we have images or links to specific external files, what we did was we put in the full URL to get to that file. Like I said, there's a slight PHP shortcut to doing this, but it's not really that much of a shortcut. And if this is easy to understand, then I would just simply stick to this. There's no harm in doing the full URL. But in my static HTML, why don't I pull this in there? I'll pull this into the side here. So here on the right-hand side is my static HTML, and here on the left-hand side is my header.php. And if that's not too confusing, hopefully that's not more confusing. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. So like I said, wherever we're linking to specific files, like in my static HTML, I can just simply link directly to the main jQuery library like this. I can just put in the jQuery main library file because it exists in the same exact directory. So index and a jQuery file. I don't have to go through a whole bunch of folders or things like that. Both of them exist in the same folder, so I can just simply put in the file name. With the header PHP, it's a little bit more complicated because there's all sorts of, like as far as the URL is concerned, and the fact that this is on all the different pages of the website, it's best to kind of be as specific as possible with where this file exists. So that's why we're putting in the full path to this particular file, which means that, and this is saying that it's going to my main domain here, and then it's looking inside the folder WP content, and then it's looking for themes, then it's looking for my theme folder, and then it's looking for JS, and then it's looking for that particular file. So again, from the root of my website, just like it has up here, I'm going into WP content, I'm going into the folder themes, I'm going into my theme folder, and I'm going into the JS folder, and then I'm finding this particular file. So it's just about being a little more specific. So we're a little more specific when it comes to our custom CSS file that we set up, our jQuery, sort of the main jQuery library, and if we have any images, like for example, we're setting up the logo, we're setting up the image that represents the mobile button, the hamburger icon. We're doing all of this in the head because, yeah, I mean, every page is going to have a logo, every page is going to have the icon for the mobile, the hamburger icon. Once again, in my static HTML here on the right, all I have to do is say images, theme, logo.png, because from this file, we just simply need to go from here. I just need to go into images, theme, and then I can find like those particular files. But again, when it comes to our header PHP, it's best to kind of be as specific as possible as far as where this actually exists. So again, all this is HTML code in order to kind of make our header work, and we're ending this file. This is the header PHP file here on the left. We're ending this file with the double div as far as the content and the content inner. again, you might not have in your static HTML a div with ID content and a second one with content header. I can't exactly remember why I did that. I think it has something to do with the padding, but I'm sure I had a reason. But anyway, you might not have this exact like setup for your static HTML, but however you define the header and the footer in your static HTML, that's what you want to pay attention to. So this is the header PHP file, and at the very end of this file, this is the very last thing that we see here. There's nothing else in this file. So the footer, again, kind of works the same way. The beginning of this footer is, if I take a look at my static HTML, this is where the header ends, and this is all content that's specific to the home page. Home page, home page, home page, home page, home page, home page, all the way down to here. Or here, rather. So what I'm defining as the footer in my static HTML, that's what I want in my footer PHP. Again, we have some comments here which don't really matter. It's not harming anything, so we might as well keep it in there. But for the most part, we copied and pasted everything from our static HTML into our footer PHP. The main exception, just like with the header PHP, we really, really, really want to keep this WP head thing. That's very, very important. In the footer PHP, we definitely want to keep this WP footer thing. And this, just like the header in the header, this belongs in the head of the HTML. In the footer PHP, this belongs right before the ending body tag. Ending body and ending HTML, this belongs right here at this point. So we can put whatever we want above this, but we definitely don't want to kind of mess with this or change the position of it. So, we put that together as far as the header and the footer, and then when we took a look at our page, like, yeah, this is all the stuff that is involved in the header, regarding the background images and our menu here at the top and our logo, and this is all the stuff that's in our footer regarding like the join us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And did I test this? Am I about to be embarrassed here? No. Okay. So yeah, the even like the mobile stuff works here. So that's where we ended up last week, and we talked a little bit about. So the only files that we've really messed with so far in our underscores theme is we were messing with the header PHP and the footer PHP. We also added in our own style sheet. We added in the custom CSS, and we added in a couple other files that we need like for our theme. But as far as PHP files, like those are the only ones that we dealt with. But we talked a little bit last week about how we can take a look at the file that's called single.php and the file which is called page.php. Page.php is going to be the template for anything in WordPress defined as a page. So anything that we define as a page in WordPress is going to be running that content through this file, page.php. Anything that we define as a post is going to run through this file, single.php. So page.php and single.php are also files that we're probably going to get into as far as customizing this to look the way that we want. There's going to be a lot of files here that you can completely ignore from start to finish. So don't stress about like the idea of like, oh, we're gonna have to go through and in order to really make this website work, we're gonna have to edit like every single one of these. Not necessarily. A lot of these you can pretty much ignore. But the most common ones obviously are the header and the footer and page and single.php. To make sure this is on working. This is still recording.
Is index PHP like that open?
So index PHP is interesting. If so, one of the things that we set up, and this was weeks ago, but when we first set up WordPress from the perspective of the dashboard, I'm going to go into settings and reading. One of the things I suggested that you do is where it says homepage displays. By default, when you first install WordPress, it's going to be on this option here where it says your latest posts. Because by default, right out of the box, WordPress really wants to be a blog website. So it assumes that like your homepage should be your latest posts. So again, when you first set up WordPress, your latest post is the one that's actually going to be checked. What I suggested when you install WordPress is that you change this to a static page. So we're changing this to a static page, and where it says homepage, this is where we can define one of the pages that's in our page list, and we can define that as the homepage. So before you actually get into this, when you're first installing WordPress, it's a good idea to go into pages, to create a page. I call it home just for the simplicity and understanding this. So I created a page called home. Then in those settings, under where we have a static page, where you have home page, I set the home page to home. So I know that whatever I edit on this home page is actually going to be the home page. That gives me a bit more control as far as what's going on the home page. Now, to answer your question, the index is what would be used if this setting, was on your latest post. Then the home page is going to be using this index.php. So if you want to work in that way, and there's nothing wrong with starting in that way, it's just that, like I said, I think that using a real page as the home page gives you a bit more control. But you can work from that perspective by saying, like, my home page is going to be my latest post, and if that's the case, then it's going to be using this index PHP. If you go like my suggestion, and what we're going to be doing in class today, if you set it to a static page, and you set the home page to a page that you created in the pages section, then that home page is going to be running through page.php, just like all other pages on the WordPress website. So it's really kind of up to you as far as like what you want to work with. If you do your latest post, then you're going to end up doing some code changes in the index PHP and some code changes in the CSS in order for it to look like you want. Again, we keep going back to the same concept of we want it to look the way we presented to the client. So I presented to the client what I presented to the client, what I got approval on, was this design here. So, well, yes, this does have the latest posts. I'm organizing these posts into different categories, and if we did just latest posts, it would kind of combine them all together in a way that would be a little more difficult to separate out. But there's multiple ways to kind of get into the same result. So it's kind of up to you. Did I answer your question about the index PHP? Okay. So, like I just said, I'm going to be dealing with this page PHP because my homepage is an actual page. And you'll notice that where I have the title of this page, it puts in dash front page. I didn't actually put that in there. It automatically does that when under reading settings, your homepage displays, whatever you set as the homepage, it's going to throw that extra indication in there just to make it as obvious as possible to the admins as far as which one is the front page or home page. Um, WordPress sometimes uses the terms front page and home page interchangeably. So just try to be aware of that. Okay. So.
What does that mean at the top?
Hmm?
The maintenance mode is active, please don't forget to deactivate.
So I have a plugin right now. Explorer. I have a plugin right now that if you go to my website, just the jdavis.com, there's nothing. So the only thing that the only way to see my website right now is if you're actually logged in. So there's a plugin that I use. What is it called? There's many maintenance plugins, just like there's many, if any kind of plugin. But the one that I've used before is called WP Maintenance Mode. And basically what happens is I'm setting the entire website into maintenance mode, which means you have to log in order to actually see the content. This is pretty typical if like you're designing a site for a client and you don't want it to be public to the world, but just in case somebody stumbles on it. But at the same time, if you're creating a website from scratch for a client, or if you're creating it on a different server, then that's fine. If you're redesigning a website for a client, then that becomes a little more difficult, because obviously Coca-Cola.com doesn't want to be down while you're building their new website. So it helps to have like a completely different server for that kind of thing. But anyway, sorry. So the short answer is that that has to do with a plugin I have currently activated.
So then your page, your website becomes active again when you log out. Is that what?
No. So if you're not logged into my website, you can't see anything. Okay. It's only if you're logged into my website that you're able to to see it. And it's just one of those things that I typically do when it comes to a lot of client websites. You don't necessarily have to, but it's a common thing that I like to do.
You have to manually deactivate it.
I have a question.
So,
I was going to say you have to manually deactivate it.
Yeah. So there's a simple switch in the plugin settings that enables me to activate and deactivate anytime I want. Yep.
So you said just use the header, footer, PHP that's in WP content. So what's all in this?
So all of these.
Because there's a
Okay. So out of.
Or do I just have it duplicated?
Yeah, you have something duplicated here.
Maybe I
That's
just
it.
remove it.
Okay, so you see all these files that start with WP dash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is your WordPress root. This is the root of your WordPress. So you have it inside of a folder called WordPress, which is fine, but anything outside of here you can ignore, because this shouldn't have anything to do with your website. So again, this,
just duplicate
yeah.
it?
So go
I
back
can
into,
delete.
yeah, sure, and include the template files too.
I need to do something about my clicker.
Well, here, just go back. Okay, so if you go into WordPress, this right here is the root of your website. Again, all these WP files, it's like all WordPress core files that you shouldn't need to edit at all. Now, go into WP content, go into themes. Now here, you should have a separate folder that would have your underscores. So mine is called...
Were those files my underscores? That I just removed?
Probably.
Should I put them down? I
yeah,
feel
you
like
just kind
they
of
were.
okay. Go
We can,
into
we can talk after.
go into themes
Okay.
and just create a brand new folder here. It's called something else.
Oh, that's what I call it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what
Just
you-
use that folder name, but create the new folder in here. Yeah, the same exact thing.
And now
Okay.
copy all.
Yeah, copy all of those files into here. Yeah, somehow like your website would have to be almost inside out.
Yeah.
It's gonna be- Yep. Okay. So again, this is the root of your website. Don't touch any of those files. So then, in okay. So yeah, in the content, in themes, in your theme file folder, then these are the files that we actually update in order to actually edit our theme. And this is where you have the header and footer and the page.php.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Cool. So, okay. So right now, I have home and about as far as my pages. Under posts, actually, let's just do this over for a second. Under posts, let's go ahead and I'm going to create a brand new one. I'm going to call latest one. Let's say latest one title. And I'm going to call this latest one content. And that's fine for now. And I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call this featured one title, featured one content. So I just created two posts, one that's called latest one title and featured one title. So these are my two posts, and under pages, these are my two pages. Right now, if I go to actually view these pages, under this page list, I'm just going to go ahead and click on view, and it's going to immediately let me view this page, which is the same as my actual home page. So I could just go to my root as well. But for the about, I can go to view, and it's going to blah 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 my domain /about. By the way, where it's getting, just in case you don't know, where it's getting the URL here. So this is /about. Where it's getting that URL is if I go to edit, it's going to come up under this permalink thing. So by default, when you create a brand new page, I create a brand new page called contact. I start to put in some content here. While I'm doing that, WordPress is kind of sneaky, and it creates a permalink for me up here. So it's going to base that just off of whatever I set up as the title. So when I create a brand new page, it's going to start to write that permalink for me, and it'll replace like any spaces or special characters with like a dash usually. But you want to be aware that you can always edit this. So I can say edit, and I can change this to something else. Like I can take out the dash B, for example, and that will be the what's called the permalink or the permanent link to my content. Even though the title might not match there. And if you were to create this, like say that I create this contact me page that's supposed to go to contact, and let's say at another point I try to create another page called contact. If I can spell that correctly. You'll see that it's called contact-2, and I'm like, oh, contact-2, I want this to be contact. So I change that, and WordPress is like, no, it needs to be contact-2. If you see that happening, it means that it's somewhere else it already has that domain, or it already has that link, so it's not going to let you have two different pages going to the same URL. Just kind of a side thing, just so that you're aware of that. So, like I said, right now I have this about, and I have my home page. Homepage has the word some content on here, and about just has these lorem ipsum paragraphs. If I look at the theme files, this is my underscores theme. If I go to page.php and I go to open that one up, then I get a page which looks like this. Now, just in case you don't believe me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some text here. And we're just going to put in the words, hello world. Now, pay very close attention to where I'm very arbitrarily putting this text. So I'm putting hello world right between the beginning of this div with the ID primary and where we have this main with the ID main. So I'm putting this phrase hello world in there. So we're going to make sure that's refreshed on the live website. If I go ahead and refresh on the about, I see hello world here. If I refresh on the home page, again, I see hello world here. And if I go into the inspect element and I kind of drill down on everything, if I find where that primary is, the div with the ID primary and the main with the ID main, I see that hello world is appearing right there in between the primary and the main, just like it is right here. This might seem kind of silly, and it kind of is, but at the end of the day, sometimes if you're ever not sure about which theme file is affecting what page on WordPress, this is an easy way of doing that. You just put in some text somewhere where you know it's going to show up, and that way, if it's showing up on the page, and you take a look at the view source, if it's showing up in the place you expect it, then you're sure that this is the file which is editing both of these pages. Does that make sense? So it's just a way of tracking, just to kind of be sure, just to be extra sure that this is the theme file for all of my pages. Now, if this is affecting both the about page as well as the home page, then we're going to need some way of distinguishing between the two. Because currently, if I take a look at the goal here, the goal here is to have this kind of look for the article page and this kind of look for the home page. And while that photo at the top is exactly the same, it is a pretty different format. So if I have, this is the look for the post page, and this is the look for the home page. However, even for something like an about, we want it to look, pretty plain. We don't want it to look like our home page. So we need some way of distinguishing between our home page and all the other pages of our website. So, before we get too crazy with this, let's take a look at this page.php file and see if there's anything that we can remove. Now, I don't have comments available on this website. I highly recommend that you will try to talk your client out of having comments on their websites. There's not a lot of websites that I think really kind of justify it, but even the ones that do, it's really kind of a pain in the neck. But anyway, I'm not using comments on this website, so these lines here, where we say if comments are open, blah, 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 all of this is just simply if you do want comments on your website, it will potentially have a form where people can fill in comments, as you would expect with a normal kind of blog. Yes.
If you have comments on your web page, are you able to, is an administrator able to clear them out periodically or something like that?
Yes. The thing with comments is this. One is, I mean, again, you really want to talk to the client to see if it's something that's really necessary or something that's really adding to the thing of their website. But with comments, it involves a lot of administration. You don't want anybody to comment something that's going public immediately that wouldn't be appropriate for that particular website. Whether it's an ad or, you know, whether it's inappropriate language or whatever, you don't want anything to go public. Which means that there's ways of setting up so that no comment goes public without some sort of administrator. But some people kind of find that annoying, like, hey, I posted this comment, why isn't it up yet, kind of thing. So it's a huge headache.
Yeah.
But even beyond all that, it also kind of opens up some security holes. You have a form which allows people to edit your website, basically. There's a public form that allows people to write content to your website. So the thing is, it's a security concern, and while there's definitely ways to kind of make it more secure, you're just kind of opening the doors a little bit, if that makes sense. But yeah, I highly recommend not having comments. But like I said, there are some websites that there's a good reason for it. It's just that you want to think of a lot. Anyway, long story short, with this particular website, with your websites this semester, I would recommend getting rid of this. It's not that it's necessarily going to get in the way of anything, but we might as well get rid of it so that our code is slightly simpler, so that we can know what we're looking at. So when I'm looking at this page.php, basically what I'm seeing here is what is going to go in between our header and our footer PHP. So our header PHP is all of this. It ends with this double content div, these double divs here. Our footer starts with the footer tag. The page.php is what's going to go exactly in between there. In fact, you can kind of see that we have this get header and this get footer here. That's basically what it's doing. It's getting the header PHP and getting the footer PHP and just putting it right here. So this is exactly what's going to go in between the header right after this content and the footer right before this part here. So again, as simple as we can keep this, the better, so we can know what it is that we're looking at. So by default, underscores is writing out this div with the ID primary, this main with the ID main here. Those aren't necessarily getting in the way of anything, but it's just kind of some containers that they use in order to make things as compartmentalized as possible. We also have this sidebar. A lot of blogs will have a sidebar on there. I personally think that it's just better to customize your own sidebar unless it's something that the client needs access to themselves. But even if the client needs access to it, there's other ways of doing it. Long story short, I would actually get rid of it for a typical website that you're going to control yourself with the backend code. But yeah, now when I take a look at this, again, we have the get header, we have the get footer, we have this div with the ID primary, we have this main tag with the ID main. I've never seen the main tag outside of a WordPress before, but I don't know, I guess they use it or something. And then we have a WordPress loop in the middle. So, before I get too heavy into that, one of the things that I said before is that we want a way of distinguishing between our home page and all the other pages. I'm using pages in quotes because I'm specifically talking about the way WordPress defines pages, not posts, but pages. So I need a way of distinguishing between all the different pages of my website, different from the home page. Okay. So right after the main here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a condition statement. So I'm going to assume that the div with the ID primary and the main with the ID main, I'm going to want on all the pages, even for the home page. That's fine. But I want a way of distinguishing between the home page and the all the other pages. So I'm going to use a PHP condition to let me know when I'm on one or the other. So the way this is going to work is right after the main tag, I'm going to put in angle bracket, question mark, PHP. And just so I don't forget, just like with ending tags, it's a good idea to end the question mark and PHP, I'm sorry, question mark and angle bracket somewhere else. So this is the beginning of our PHP code, and this is the end of PHP code. Like I said, we're not going to be getting too heavy into PHP code this semester. We're mostly going to be using recipes of what it is that we need to just to kind of navigate around WordPress. But here we're going to write in some PHP code. We have, again, angle bracket, question mark, PHP, and then our PHP code is going to end with question mark, angle bracket. In between there, I'm going to say if, and I'm going to have a set of parentheses, and then a colon. And that's a regular colon, not a semicolon. I'm really going to zoom in on this. Now, I'm going to write something in those parentheses, but before I do that, I'm going to do a couple lines down, and then I'm going to also write angle bracket, question mark, PHP. I'm going to end the PHP code with a question mark and angle bracket. And in between there, I'm going to write the word else, E-L-S-E. And then, again, a regular colon. Lastly, a couple of lines down, I'm going to, once again, create a PHP code. So I'm going to do angle bracket, question mark, PHP. I'm going to end it with question mark, angle bracket, and in between there, I'm going to write the word end if, all one word, and then end it with a semicolon. Okay. So, we talked about conditions a little bit with JavaScript at the beginning of the semester. With the if and else statement. In the JavaScript, I don't have that file here, but in the JavaScript, you don't have to write this part here, but I'm just going to kind of show you just as a reminder. In JavaScript, the way that we set it up was if, and then some sort of condition, and then we had a set of curly braces, and then whatever goes inside of those curly braces, it's only going to run this code if that condition is true. Now, I don't remember if we actually got into else, but else will also have a set of curly braces, and it will have some code in between those curly braces. And basically, the condition is a question, which is either going to be true or false. It has to be true or false. The question is not like, what is X? The question is not like, what's the value of some variable. The question is very specifically a question that's either going to be yes or no, true or false. For example, is X equal to 5? Is A greater than 3? Is Y less than 4? Is X equal to, some bit of text? But anyway, we have a true or false statement here. Inside the curly braces, it's going to run if that's true. Very often with if statements, we also have an else. And if this is not true, it's going to do what's in the else. So we know for a fact that it's only going to do one or the other. It can't possibly do both, and it can't possibly do neither one. It has to do one or the other, where we have an if and an else statement. So this is kind of the way that it looks in JavaScript. In PHP, we're still using the terms if and else, but it looks slightly different. Now, you'll sometimes see curly braces with PHP, where instead of these colons, like you might see a curly brace, and instead of else if, you also might see a curly brace. However, this will also do the same thing, but I think that's a little more clear. But basically, inside the parentheses for this if statement, once again, we're going to have a condition. Which again, that condition is some sort of question, which is going to be either true or false. If that is true, then it's going to do whatever we have in here. Else, it's going to do whatever we have in here. And then this whole thing is ending with an endf. So we have some code here, we have some code here, and it's either going to do one or the other. It can't do both, and it can't do neither. It has to, when we have an if and else statement, it has to do one or the other. Now, the code that we have in here, we might put in, with an if-else statement in PHP, we might put in PHP code. We also might put in HTML code. We also might just put in just regular text. So, for example, I'm going to use the bold tag, and I'm just going to write the word true. And here I'm going to use the italics tag, and I'm going to write the word false. For the condition, I'm going to write the word true here. And I know for a fact that's just going to be true. We're going to get into what this condition actually is in just a minute, but I just want to show you exactly how this works. So right after the main, we have this if, else, and endif statement here. Right after the main, we have this group of PHP codes that is allowing us to check this this condition out. After it does all this, well, it's going to do its normal thing with this WordPress loop, which again I'm going to get into in a minute. But right now, we're saying if, and the condition is absolutely going to be true. What we're going to do is we're going to see bold true, and we're definitely not going to see an italics false. So let's go and save that. Let's go and upload it. And this will work on any of our pages, because all of our pages are running through this page.php. So I'm going to go to the about just as a way of seeing this. And again, I see a bold true here. If I take a look at the view source, once again, I'm not seeing any PHP code in view source. But right after the main, I'm just seeing a bold with the word true in there. And then again, it's doing all the stuff that involves with that WordPress loop thing. So, just in case you don't believe me, I'm going to go ahead and change where I say if true. I'm going to change it to just simply the word false. So I know this is going to evaluate to false. We're going to update this on the server, and then when I take a look at this, actually on the page, I get an italicized false. And when I take a look at the source code, once again, right after the main tag, I get an italicized false. So, now that you believe me, yes.
Are true and false like something that PHP already knows?
When it comes to what I'm writing in here, yes. What I'm writing in here, I should have wrote something different, just so it doesn't look like real code. But yeah, I mean, so this is just completely arbitrary, but the words true and false, yes, are things that PHP understands. Now, again, what I have highlighted in here inside the parentheses should be a question, should be a condition. So if I write in the words true or false, it's absolutely making that true or false. We mostly only use that for testing part of the parentheses. yes, those are words that PHP would understand for that purpose. So the condition that I actually want here is I want to test to see if we're on the front page or not. So this I was about to do it from memory, but why don't I show you where if I don't remember it exactly, where I would actually pull this information. So let's go to on the class website. This developer WordPress.org, again, there's a lot of different resources in here that pretty much gives you anything that you would need as far as a WordPress code. Now, what I'm looking for is a way of testing to see if we're on the home page. I'm sorry, on the front page. They do have a thing as far as home, but we're actually looking for... Okay. I'm going to Google as far as WordPress is front page. Yeah. And I'll pull it somewhere on the WordPress Codex, which is as far as this WordPress.org development website. But yeah, so this is the code that we actually need. This is checking to see if it actually is the front page or not. So we're going to use this exact code inside this if statement. So inside the parentheses here, we have this exact statement here, which says is underscore front underscore page, and then a set of parentheses. So pay very close attention that at the very end of this, we have 3 parentheses. We have 1 left and 2 rights. But it does match because like we have a opening close set right here, and this last right is ending off the one for the if statement. Now let's put something a little more intelligent in here. So instead of true, I'm going to say this is the front page. And instead of false, I'm going to say this is not the front page. One is bold, one is italics. But right after the main tag, we have a set. We have this if, else, and end if then. The thing that we're checking to see is if it's the front page. If it's not, if it is the front page, then it's going to do whatever we have right before the else. Whether it's just text, whether it's HTML code, doesn't matter what it is. We might put in some PHP. We will put in some PHP code here. But otherwise, the else, we're going to have this text here which says this is not the front page, and that's in italics. Whereas if it is in the front page, it's in bold. Go ahead and save this. And if I take a look at my home page, I get in bold, it says this is the front page. If I take a look at my about, in italics, it says this is not the front page. So my about, it says this is not the front page. In my home page, it says this is the front page. Both of these are pages as WordPress defines pages. And both of them are using this exact same file. But by using this if, else, and else if, end if thing, it is creating a fork in the road with what happens if it's the front page or not the front page. So this is pretty important because if it's not the front page, we want all of this to run normally. This is what a normal page does. And this is where we're going to put as far as the else. However, if it is the front page, then we're going to be doing something very different than the normal thing. So before I go too much further, I'm going to go ahead and put in some comments here. because we're going to end up with a bunch of code here, so it's going to help to have some comments and know what this stuff is before we have a lot of stuff in between this if, else, and end if. Right? So right after the end if, I'm going to put in a comment, and what I like to do, this is a personal choice of mine, you can put in whatever comment you want, but the comment, just like with JavaScript, just like with CSS, comment's going to start with slash and asterisk, and it's going to end with asterisk slash, and in between that you can put in, just whatever you want as far as the comment. What I like to do is I like to, when it comes to these end ifs and else and things like that, I'll put in a copy of what I have for the if. Again, feel free to write whatever comment you want, whatever makes the most sense to you, to actually define what that actually is. But I'll do that for the end if, but I'll also do it for the else. Because again, if I have a whole bunch of code in here and I all of a sudden come across an else, I'm going to forget what that else is actually a part of, especially if I have a bunch of ifs and else's in my code. So if I have this in here, I'm going to say, oh, that's right, this else is referring to this if is the front page thing. And when I get down to this end if, I'm like, oh, that's right, this is ending off this if statement that's checking to see if it's the front page. But again, write whatever comment you want in here that makes that a little more clear to you. So, what I'm going to do is, again, this right here is what the page normally does. And before we copy this in here, let's take a look at this a little bit. Okay. So just like with our JavaScript code, we have a while statement. And at the very end, we have an end while. So we have the while, we have the end while. Just like the if and the end if, this is kind of a replacement for braces. But still kind of the same thing. This is the end of the while, and this is the beginning of the while. So inside the parentheses here, we have, again, it's some sort of condition. And it's a condition that evaluates either true or false. As long as it's true, it's going to keep doing what's inside of this while and end while over and over and over and over again. So it's going to keep doing this over and over again until this is false. So basically what it's doing is it's checking to see if the post actually exists. It calls it post in this particular case, even though it's actually a page. I recognize that can be a little bit confusing, but we're on the page.php, so we know we're talking about a page within WordPress. But basically, it's just double checking. It's like, is there an about page? If there is, then it's going to actually write that content for the about page. So this is the way that it goes about writing that content. When we write the content for the home page, it's going to look a little bit different. But for now, when it comes to just a normal page, this is all we need. As far as the while, have posts, and then it's going to say the post and get template part of this page there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut and paste this whole thing, starting from this beginning PHP tag here with the angle bracket question mark PHP, and the end of this PHP code here, this question mark angle bracket. And I'm going to move this inside the else that we set up for the if else checking to see if it's the front page. You know what, let's even keep this italics in here. Not that we would actually want this for the production, but I just want to keep it in there just to kind of double check right now. So inside of our page.php, we have this div primary thing, and we have this main tag. And again, both those are pretty arbitrary. But the important thing is we have this if, else, and end if set. The if right now, if it's the front page, the only thing we're displaying is this is the front page. Otherwise, if it's not the front page, then we are doing the normal functionality for a page, just to kind of pull all the content from that page. So right now, if I go ahead and save this, make sure it's uploaded. If I go back to my About page, there shouldn't be any change whatsoever. We still have italicized, this is not the front page, just like we specified it right here, and italics is not the front page. We have that here. Then it's displaying the About page in the normal fashion, as far as displaying the title as well as the actual content for that page. But if I go to my home page, now if I go to my home page, it's going to display the bold. This is the front page, but it's not doing this normal functionality anymore. The normal functionality is we just simply have the title home. We have some content, which if we actually go to edit the home page, I mean, yeah, we have that a title here. We have some content here. Now, if I go ahead and refresh this home page, the only thing we have in here is this is the front page. We have a completely blank slate for our home page, and we have a place to actually put our home page content here, where we have this is the front page. So again, just kind of like with the whole purpose we were doing underscores S in the first place, we're trying to get this to a blank slate, but also knowing where to put the content where we need it.
So why does your content that you put in on your pages, like in the WordPress dashboard, not showing that?
So for the About, it is. The About, it's working normally. The home page is not. Under the About, if I go to edit this actual About page, we have the title, we have a whole bunch of paragraphs. It's showing that title, it's showing those paragraphs. Under the home page, if I go to edit this, under the home page, we also have a title, and we have this this text on content. So the home page is not showing the normal functionality. The About page is. The reason is, in my page.php, I have this fork in the road here, where we have this if and else statement. If it's the home page, then we're going to be doing something dramatically different here.
How can you move all of that stuff into the house? Okay.
With the else, this is a long, you know what, let's put in a comment. This displays a page normally. Yeah. So this code here displays a page normally, in the sense that, you know, we have title and content, which we're going to get into this a little bit more detail a little bit later. But this is going to display the page normally, but it only exists in this else, and this else only is going to trigger if it's not the front page. So this gives us a blank slate to work with for our home page. And the reason is our home page, again, looks pretty different than a normal page. Yeah, we could try to design all of this within the WordPress, but it's the WordPress dashboard, but it's not going to pull the individual posts. Like, you know, we need this to pull from other posts, you know, around. We need to kind of make sure that it's arranged in a very different way than a normal kind of article or about page. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So we have a blank slate to work with, so we can actually start to pull the posts into different buckets here. Now, we have one big problem with that, is that we don't have posts to work with. So I was trying to do a little bit of this before class, but the internet was running really slow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create some posts for us to work with, and we're just going to use some lorem ipsum and some basic images here. But before I go too much further, let's think about the categories. So so right now I have 4 categories. I have latest news, I have features, I have editorial, and I have events. Now, latest news might be a combination. Something in the latest might also exist in features. Like maybe it's just like as far as based on the data like that. But just for simplicity's sake, let's pretend that latest news is its own category. So latest news, features, editorial, and events. We're gonna have 4 categories here. Now it's perfectly fine for a post to have multiple categories, but the way that we're going to work with this just for today, just for the example, is that each post is only going to have one category and it's going to exist inside of one of these 4 here. So, before I get into creating some fake posts here, let's go under posts and let's go to categories. So here it's going to have a list of all the categories on your WordPress website, and we could create these as we're creating the posts, but we might as well do them all here, just so that we can see what it is that we're working with. So under name, let's go ahead and say latest news. When we write that in, this is where it says name, it's looking for an English version of this name, something that can be read by humans. Where it says slug, that's going to be more of a computer version of that name. Like it says, a URL-friendly version of that name. So it's going to make sure it doesn't have any spaces or special characters. So when it comes to the human version of it, again, feel free to make it as descriptive as possible. The slug will naturally be something that's more URL friendly. And you don't actually have to write it in. If you just say add new category, it will create the slug for you automatically. So when I created that as far as latest news, it automatically populated it in this list over here. We also have this one called uncategorized. We can rename that if we want to, but we actually can't get rid of uncategorized. Uncategorized is exactly what it sounds like. It's whatever doesn't fall into another category. So it has to be there as far as the default. Even though we could rename it, we have to have at least something that signifies ones that don't fall into any other category. Anyway, so we have latest news here. If I go into quick edit, I'll see the slug that exists for this, latest dash news. So I have latest news. Let's go ahead and say featured. Editorial. Or wait, what did I call it? I call it editorial or opinions. Okay, editorial. And events. So I now have these 4 categories: latest news, featured, editorial, and events. Each one has, again, its own slug, which is lowercase. It doesn't have any spaces or special characters in it. So now, if I go into the post that I already created, I have latest one title. If I go into edit this one, I get a list of the categories here. Now again, like I said, you could, as you're making a brand new post, if you think like, oh, actually I need another category, you don't necessarily have to go into that categories page. You actually write the new category right here. But sometimes it's helpful to kind of see the full list of there. So we have latest. Let's go ahead and categorize under latest. And as you can see, these are checkboxes. So anything could have multiple categories underneath it. But as far as latest, we're going to categorize it under latest news. While we're here, let's go ahead and give it a image. Yeah, so that's fine. And let's put in just a couple of paragraphs of Lorem Ipsum. Okay, so we have latest one title, we have the content for that. Um, something I'm forgetting. That's fine. We have one for featured. Let's go and edit that one. Let's make sure it has the check for featured. Let's put in, again, the lorem ipsum. Let's put it after this where it says feature one content. And let's also give it an image. And we'll update that. So let's go and make a few of these. We have latest, we have featured, editorial. And event. Okay. Let's create another one for latest. Another one for featured. Make sure it has the right category. Some sort of.
You didn't upload images to your media library and that's it, right?
Yep. And the thing is, well, you could do it again. You could do it through the FTP. It makes a little more sense to do it through the media library because it's going to make sure that it tracks that as far as like the database a little bit better. They're running out of images here. Okay, so let's take a look at the post list. Let's see what we have so far. So we can see as far as the titles here, we can see the categories here. We have 2 for the latest, we have 2 for the featured, we have 1 editorial, and we have 2 for the events. Let's make 2 for the editorials. I can't stand to have this uneven. Sure. Cool. So right now we have 2 posts per category. So where we want to get to is we want to set it up so that much like we have in our design here, we have 4 different buckets. We have 4 different areas for these 4 different kinds of posts. And again, the assumption is that the client or whatever web writer they have on their staff is actually going to be writing these posts just like I was just doing. Creating posts, creating content, uploading images, things like that. So it's our job as the developer to set it up so that the posts are displaying, the information from the posts are displaying in these 4 different categories here. But we need some sort of code which is going to pull the information into at least 4 different containers based on the actual category. So, first I'm going to go ahead and create a div. Now, as far as the CSS is concerned, we'll deal with that in a minute. But for right now, I just want to get the content up there. So we're going to create a div with the ID latest posts. And we're also going to have one for featured, and one for editorial, and one for events. And for right now, let's just go and throw in an H2 tag for each one of these. So we know what we're looking at. Okay. So all of this exists inside of this if, where we have the is front page. See what I tell you? We're already getting kind of long with this. So as I scroll down here, as I see else, I want to know like where this is ending. So anyway, all this exists inside this if is front page, so we know that this should only exist actually on the home page, where we have 4 different buckets for the latest posts, the featured, editorial, and events. And if I save this, I take a look at it right now on the home page. I just get these H2 tags, which should be stylized differently, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay. So I also have some code on the class website. There is a website, CSS Tricks, where typically, as you would expect, would have lots of different snippets and things like that for CSS code. But they also have this one for what we're going to be doing today. I was trying to find as simple as possible the code that you actually need to get this started. And this is probably the simplest place that I could find it. So rather than just assuming that you're going to be watching the screen cap video or whatever like that, I wanted to provide a link to it so that you can copy and paste the exact code that you're going to need for this, with just a couple of minor changes to begin with. So go ahead and from the third link that's on the class website, the one that says run loop on posts of specific category, go ahead and copy the code that's from that very first black box there. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste it inside this first bucket for latest posts. So I want to make sure that the div begins and ends after all of this. And yeah, I mean, we can tab things over so that it's a little more clear to read. But yeah. So we have a couple of things going on here. First, and again, I have this tabbed over so it's easier to read. Not that the tabs really matter that much, but you can see that everything that I'm doing right now exists inside this first bucket for latest posts. And we have these 4 lines here of PHP, which are doing the thing that we want. These lines down here inside the else statement, this is what happens if we want to display a page normally. These lines up here is trying to get content for posts, a list of posts that does not have to necessarily do with the home page itself. We're pulling it from a different area of WordPress entirely. So there's a couple of different parts of this. First, we have this line here that says query post. Whenever I'm talking about lines, I'm ignoring the part that says angle bracket question mark PHP and the part that says the question mark angle bracket. We just know that this begins and ends PHP code. So when I talk about a PHP line, I'm talking about what goes on inside of that. So this is the first PHP line. This is the second PHP line. This is the third one inside of this. But anyway, so this first PHP line, we have query post, and in parentheses and in quotes, we have cat equals 5. So we're not putting 5 cats on our website. That is a short for the category. Now that 5 is an ID. So it's looking for an ID number of this particular category. So, whatever you create inside of WordPress, pretty much just about everything that you create inside of WordPress has some sort of ID on it. So the go back to this for just a minute. Whenever we create a new post or a new page, each of those posts and pages has some sort of ID number on it. Whenever we create a new category, that has an ID on it. Whenever we create a new tag, even when we upload media through the media library, each one of the media files that we have has an ID specifying on it. I wish that WordPress made this a bit more obvious. However, if you look at the link for any one of the pages here, like if I go into where I say edit under about, if I take a look at the URL that shows up at the very bottom, inside of that URL, it has post equals 17. If I actually click on edit here and actually take a look at the URL here, inside of this it has post equals 17. Now this is under page. Again, sometimes WordPress calls pages posts. Unfortunately, it can be a little bit confusing, but just bear with me. So anyway, this particular about page, it's calling post equals 17. If I go under the real posts and I go into any one of these, it has post equals, in this case, post equals 50. So this is the ID for this one is 50. If I go into one of these other posts, this one is post equals 44. I mean, typically it's going to be going in order as you create things, but sometimes it's not quite that easy to predict. So if you're trying to find a ID of, again, anything that you create in WordPress, whether it is posts, categories, pages, media, anything like that. So the categories, where do we get this category number from? This is category ID. It's looking for a category ID of 5. Let's go to the categories. If I go to edit any one of these, so if I edit editorial, inside of the URL up here, it has, it has tag underscore ID equals 5. If I go to events, it has tag underscore ID equals 6. If I go under latest news, it has tag underscore ID equals 3. So in this particular case, it calls it the tag ID, but that's what the ID is in this particular case. Now, if IDs are kind of annoying, there is a way of specifying it in the code by the actual title or the slug of the category. However, that involves a little more PHP code. So if you don't mind, at least for right now, looking at just as far as the ID names, we can use that. So for latest news, the ID that we're looking for in this particular case is 3. So where it says query posts, and we have a set of parentheses and cat equals 5, we're going to change this to cat equals 3. And what this line is doing, it's saying query posts. It's asking the database for a list of posts. It's asking for, that's what query posts means in this particular case. It's asking for posts from the database. And the database is like, great, I have lots of posts. What posts do you want? Inside the parentheses, we're saying, I only want the ones where the category is equal to 3. So query post is basically asking the database for some posts, and inside the parentheses, we can set up a set of filters of what posts we actually want. Maybe we're looking for ones off a specific category. Maybe we're looking for ones with a specific tag. Maybe we're looking for ones with a specific date. Maybe we're looking for a very, very, very specific post, one with one specific ID. All of those filters would potentially go within these parentheses here, where I currently have cat equals 3. But right now, the only thing I'm asking for is that the category, the ID of the category is 3. And again, while it's a little bit annoying, the easiest way to pull in that category ID is if you go to the categories under posts, you go to edit, you're going to see that category ID somewhere in the URL. Like I said, I wish WordPress made that a little more clear. And like I said, there is a way to do this so that you can write in the category name, specifically the slug, but I wanted to keep this code a little bit simple so that you don't have to dissect too much. So, the next part of this, we have query posts, so it's pulling in all these posts. The database is saying, great, here's all these posts. It just throws up all these posts into this page. But it's kind of just in the back end, so it's like setting it up in like a variable. The next part that we have here is we have both an if statement and a while statement. So if you remember, the while is a loop. The while starts right here, where I have highlighted right here, and it ends right here. So it's doing some sort of loop in between these two lines here, where it's going through a whole bunch of posts. Surrounding the while statement, we have an if statement. The if statement is basically just asking, hey, do the posts exist? It's just double checking to make sure the posts exist before it tries to display anything. If we did not have this if statement in here, and for some reason we weren't able to pull up a post with this query post, then we would likely get an error. For example, say that we set it to category whatever, some sort of ridiculous number. Now, that category doesn't actually exist. So what that means, so this category doesn't actually exist, which means that it's not actually going to be able to pull up any posts here. Now, if we did not have this if statement, if this is just like kind of a guard, it's like basically double checking before it does this loop. If we did not have this guard in place that's checking to make sure that the posts actually exist, then it would try to do this while, and we would get an error on the page basically saying, hey, I don't know what's going on here. You're trying to display a post that doesn't actually exist. So we have this if statement in here as a way of saying, do we have posts? Are we sure that the posts actually exist? Before it actually tries to do a while loop between all those different posts. So we have an if, which is checking to make sure the posts actually exist. Then we have a while, which is running through all the posts. In here, where we have PHP the content, it's essentially just simply pulling in. When we say the content, it is pulling in the content that we have right here. So that's what it's actually looking for here. This is how it defines the content. So in our home page, we don't want to actually pull up all of this code here. We essentially want to pull in like either the title or the excerpt or the date or something like that. So what options do we have here other than the content? Well, if we take a look again on the class website, in this first link, which goes to the loop on the developer WordPress.org, this loop that's talking about, and again, we're seeing some of the same code here. We're seeing if have posts, and we're saying while have posts, blah, blah, blah. The only difference is, and at least in this basic loop, is we don't have that query post on. So again, this is kind of describing generally what the loop does in context. When we scroll down, once it finishes describing basically what the loop is, then we get a reference as far as what the loop can actually display. So under that reference, for example, we have the content. So the content is going to display the main content of a poster page, which is kind of redundant, but unless we actually define what the content is. So when it's saying the content, it's talking what exists inside this box. Now, if we go back to that reference, where's that reference? If we want to pull up the author of the page, if we want to pull up the category of that particular post, we want to pull up the ID of that post. If we want to pull up the tags of that post, something like that, then we can use this text instead. Instead of the content, let's pull in the title. So I'm going to replace the content with the title. Because otherwise we have all these paragraphs and it's just going to be tough to actually read. So in my code where I did have the content, I'm going to replace that with the title. So this is the exact code that I pulled from the link on the class website in this black box under run loop on post on a specific category. The only thing that I changed within what's in this first black box is the category number, or the category ID number, and instead of the content, I'm pulling in the title. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. And once again, this ID number, it might not be 3 for you, but the way that you can check to see what that number should be is if you go to your posts and you go to categories, and if you actually click to edit one of those, oh, actually another way, no, that doesn't do it, never mind. They need to list the ID numbers. Anyway, if you go to edit one of these categories, you're going to see that number in the URL where it says tag underscore ID, just in case you can't see that. Inside, wait on a second. Inside the URL for this page, somewhere in there is going to be an ID number, and you're going to be looking for where it says tag underscore ID equals, in this particular case it's 5, but in my case for the latest post it's 3. So with all of that in here, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is uploaded on the server, and too many tabs open. I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and yeah, I have a list of my titles for my latest tabs. So where it says latest 2 title and latest 1 title, those are the 2 titles of the post that I have under that category. Now right now they're all in the same line. If I go ahead and take a look at it in the inspect element, if I take a look at the inspect element, right after this H2 tag, I'm not seeing any PHP code whatsoever. It's all hidden. But the output of that PHP code is latest 2 title and latest 1 title. I'm actually surprised they're not on different lines in the code. But I don't have anything surrounding the titles themselves. I don't have any context for the titles. I'm just simply throwing those titles out there. So where I have the title, again, it's just simply throwing those titles out there with no context whatsoever. But we now have a way of identifying what category we want. We now have some code which is able to loop through all those posts that have that particular category. Inside of that loop, we can specify what it is specifically from each post we actually want to display. Now, we have some PHP code which has the title in here. I can throw any HTML code that I want around this PHP code. For example, if I don't want them to all appear on one line, let's go ahead and throw a bold tag around it. But that's not going to put it on its own line, so let's go ahead and also put in a BR tag for a line break. And you know what? Let's put in 2 BR tags. So I'm going to put in a line break here, and then a line break after this as well. So, as you can see, I'm writing HTML code around the PHP code. This is the PHP code, and I'm able to write HTML code around HTML code that I know around where it's going to have a placeholder for that title. So now when I take a look at this, upload it to the server. Now when I take a look at this, I get latest 2 title and a bold tag, and I get a couple of line breaks after that. Latest 1 title and a couple of line breaks after that. So, I'm interested in not just the title. I also want to pull in that image that exists with each one. Now the image is a little bit tricky, and unfortunately I don't think... Yeah. So the image... for some reason is not in this particular list. However, we can pull it in, and I'm just trying to remember the code for it. So I don't have all of these memorized, but Google is just a short thing away. So this, I believe this is it, the post thumbnail. Let's check this out. So what I'm going to do is, oh wait, actually, oh, hang on a second. It does the featured image a little bit oddly. Yeah, this is the right one. So in this particular case, we're going to go for the post thumbnail URL, and then set a parentheses. So right now I'm going to throw this inside of an italics tag just so you can kind of see it. But just like we have for the title up here, I'm going to put in angle bracket, question mark, PHP, and then we're going to say the underscore post underscore thumbnail underscore URL, set of parentheses, and then we're ending the PHP code here. So in the same way that we have the title up here, we have the post thumbnail URL down here. And right now I'm throwing that inside of an italics tag just to make it a bit more obvious. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Let's double check, make sure this works before this. Cool. So we have the title itself in bold, and we have the URL, which is going to the thumbnail image right here. Why do I want that URL? Well, because unlike title or content, where I can just simply display the text as itself, the database is not saving an image. The database is saving a URL to an image. So as soon as we upload the image into our media library, this image now has a URL that goes directly to this particular image. So this image has a URL that's going to feature 3. And when I tie it to a particular page or a particular post, in this example, I tie it to a post, it's not like it's storing the image itself, it's actually storing an ID to this particular URL, basically.
And how do you tie it to the post?
So in the dashboard, when I go to create a brand new post or I'm editing a post, then if I scroll down, there's a box for featured image. So this is in posts, and this when I'm doing a brand new post. I scroll down here on the right hand side, there's a box for featured image. By default, it should say something like set featured image, and when I click on that, it pulls up the media library, and I can either pick something that I've already uploaded, or at this point I can go ahead and drag and drop in a brand new image into this place. The media library, what's really cool about the media library is the media library is shared among the entire website. So it's not like, oh, I uploaded this one photo for this page over here, I need to upload it again for this page over here. Like, no, as soon as you upload any image or file into the media library from any page on your website, you can reference that exact same image or file. So this is how we tie it into the dashboard. Now, when I'm taking a look at this loop, I'm looping through all the different posts. When I pull up the post and it comes up in this loop, there's a lot of information that's involved in that post. In that post has a title. That post has some content. That post has categories. That post has a date on it. That post has a published status on it. Maybe it's published, maybe it's a draft. That post has tags on it. That post has an author on it. That post has a URL. So when I'm pulling up, when I'm looping through the different posts, and at this point we have loaded in one post, it's up to me to pick and choose what I actually want from that post. So right now, all I'm pulling in is the title, and I'm pulling in the URL to that featured image. The title right now is in bold, and the URL to that image is in italics, which is why when I take a look at this in when I take a look at this in the browser, I have the titles, which are in bold, and the URLs, the images, which are currently in italics. Now, I set it up in italics just so we can kind of double check to make sure that it exists, just so we can see it. But obviously, hopefully it's obvious. Obviously, when we actually pull in that URL, what we really want to do is we want to put it inside of an image tag. So, again, I'm writing HTML that I know, like image src equals something. So this is HTML that I know as far as an image tag. What happens inside the quotations for the src is the URL. So to get that URL, I need this that I have selected right now, starting with the angle bracket question mark PHP and ending with the question mark in the bracket here. I'm pulling in, this is going to pull in the actual URL of that featured image. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that inside of the quotations for the src for the image tag. So in the same way I have it in italics up here, now I'm actually using that inside the src for this image tag. So with each of these posts, I'm doing three different things. I'm grabbing the title and I'm putting it inside of a bold tag. I'm grabbing the thumbnail URL and putting it inside an italics tag, and I'm reusing that thumbnail URL and using it again inside of an actual image tag. So now when I take a look at this, I see the title, I see the URL of the image in italics, and I see the image itself. Same thing here, the title, the URL to that image, and the actual image itself.
Do you want to have the URL to that image, or why is that there?
So we don't actually need it at the end. Like obviously, we're not.
Once you get it, you can just put it in the image.
Yeah, I mean obviously we don't need to like see the actual URL to the image. The only reason why I'm doing it is to double check, just to make sure I'm pulling in the right thing. So if I was a really, really confident WordPress programmer, then I would just start with this, like going immediately into that. But you know what? I'm not sure if I pulled in the right category, or I'm not sure if this title is exactly right. You know, I want to display that text just to start off with, just to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. But once I know that I'm looking at the right thing, then yeah, ideally I actually want to put it inside an image tag. So at this point, I can go ahead and restart. Cool. Let's start doing this a bit more practically, now that we can kind of see that I'm pulling in the right content. So, I'm going to go back to my static HTML website. So this is my static HTML website on the right. Right now I'm looking at feature, or okay. So I'm looking at latest news, but for now I'm going to mock this latest news up just like I'm doing with features, where I have the image here on the left hand side and just the title of it here on the right hand side. So where is it? Okay. So here where we have home content bottom, we have home content features, we have the H1, I put them in H1 tags, that's what it is. I have the H1 for features, and then for each one of these features, I have an anchor tag. The anchor tag has a div inside of it that's representing the image, and then a div which is representing the actual text. So this is my static HTML, which is why the text itself is explicitly, literally written in there. Same thing with the images themselves; they're explicitly literally written in there. The anchor tag and the div.
Yeah. Like as far as the season, like why like when you have that, is the anchor tag only used for links, like recaps?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we want to, if I'm looking at features and editorial, for example, if I want to group these two things together, this image with this text here on the right-hand side, yes, you're right. I could use a div to group the two of them together. However, in my head, I want to make sure that this whole thing is clickable to the actual feature. So if I want to make sure that not only the image as well as the text is clickable, I could group them both in a div and put a separate anchor tag around both of them. But since they're both going to the same place anyway, I might as well group the entire thing in an anchor tag and kind of treat it like a div. So if I group the entire thing in an anchor tag and treat it like a div, then I know that I can just use one href, which is going to where that's actually going to exist. That's not actually going to go to just simply slash, but by using an anchor tag to surround both the image as well as the text, then I'm able to do it this way. Does that make sense? Now, in my static HTML, I forgot how I put this together. I did it a while ago. In my static HTML, the way that I set this up is, again, like we have an anchor tag, which is the category for this group. I set up a div for the image, and a div for the title. The reason why I set up a div for the image and not an image tag itself. So, when we set up an image tag, we have full control over the width and height of that image tag. And we can manipulate that width and height either by putting in a width and height attributes to the image tag itself, or we can manipulate the width and height in CSS. It's much more common to do it inside of CSS rather than the attributes, but with an image tag we have either one. With the width and height, we are able to make sure that all these are going to be the exact same width by just putting in width, and if we want to make sure they're all the same height, we can just put in height. With an image tag, if you only use one property or the other, only use width or you only use height, then it's going to make the other thing proportionate. However, in this particular design, again, be very close to the attention to that statement. In this specific design, what I'm thinking is I want all of these to be the exact same width and the exact same height, which is fine, but if the original image is not, if they're not all conforming to this exact ratio, which is about a 1:1 ratio, if they're not all conforming to this exact ratio, then what I'm going to end up with is stretched images. If I'm using an image tag, then I have to either use the original ratio or I'm ending up with stretched images. If instead of an image tag, I use a div, and I use the image as a background image, then I have the option of cropping. So I want the option of cropping because I'm going to assume, maybe I should stop recording for this. I'm going to assume the client is inept, and the client themselves do not have the ability to, or at least the patience, to Photoshop these images to crop them all the exact same way. So I'm going to tell the client, hey, I have this placeholder for an image, but just to let you know, it's going to crop whatever image you put in here. It's ideal if you put in an image that's a 1:1. However, it's going to crop the image just like kind of right here in the center. And I want to take that burden off the client as far as trying to crop the image themselves. So I'm using it as a background image, which gives me the option of cropping it rather than stretching or distorting the image. Yes?
Does WordPress offer like a photo edit crop tool to the
That's a very good question. So I've looked for that kind of thing, like as far as a plugin, and I've seen some, but I haven't seen one that I really, really like. I want to be very clear. There are cropping tools, plugins that exist within WordPress so that the client themselves, once they upload an image, they can use the tools here that are involved in the plugin to crop the images themselves. I personally haven't found one that I really like that much. It's been a little while since I've looked, but feel free to keep looking yourself, and you might disagree with me as far as like, you know what, I think this one's fine. But yes.
I thought in the media library there was like a cropping tool kind of. It's like,
so when you go to edit image, this is
straight up or something.
yeah, there's okay. Yeah, you can draw on the image itself, and if you want a specific crop, then if like I put in 1:1 here, then as I draw it, it's definitely going to be locked 1:1, and then you can kind of set the dimensions like that. Now, when you do this, I'm trying to remember if it creates. I think one of the things that I don't like about this is I think it does it to the image itself without creating a copy. So you'd have to make a copy manually if you didn't want to. Like if I wanted a separate image that had this crop, then I have to put it in again and crop that particular one.
Yeah, it does move to the whole
Yeah.
instance of that image for sure.
And the other thing about it is like, so this, I don't know.
If we make a copy, wouldn't that change like your code? Because then you're linking to the wrong image.
Yeah, so when you make a copy, if you put in a new image, which is one that is cropped or is not cropped, you have to make sure it's linked to the right one. So yeah, so you're right. The thing is, the media library does have this ability to it. I don't know how intuitive this is to a non-techie client.
Yeah.
I guess I've just had a lot of experience with clients that don't have much patience for things that are not very, very simple. It's, again, a big part of this is a conversation you're going to have with the client about like what things they can and can't do. And hopefully you'll have clients that if you explain to them this kind of interface, they would have the patience to do so. Or again, like I said, there are plugins out there that will have slightly better interfaces for this kind of thing.
I noticed that apply changes to thing, and maybe that would.
Where you see that?
At the bottom, underneath thumbnail settings, you apply changes to. If you were to do just thumbnail, that would only apply those desktoping to thumbnails.
So when you upload an image to the media library, I'm going to go into where it has uploads, and 2018, 2011. So whenever I upload an image, and I actually start using that image, you'll notice that it actually duplicates that into a few different sizes. So it'll create a thumbnail size. It'll also create like a medium size as well as a large size, wherever it's like relatively big. And you can actually specify I believe it is under settings and media. Yeah. So under settings and media, you can decide what is the thumbnail size, what is the medium size, what is the large size, based on like a max width and max height for all of them. And when you upload files that are bigger than the thumbnail, I think a lot of the files that I uploaded are smaller than the actual thumbnail, which is why it's only doing it to the one. But whenever you upload images that are bigger than that, WordPress immediately creates a duplicate that will have like the different crops you set up here. So one way of handling this, what I'm talking about right now, the goal that I'm talking about right now is trying to get these one by one thumbnails. One way to set this up is to specify the thumbnail size you want to end up with here, and then you can actually just pull that particular version of that image, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. With this particular way, I don't have to worry about the WordPress settings, and I can go ahead and make those changes to how it's cropping it directly in the CSS, and I don't have to worry about it creating brand new files in order for that thing. But yeah. So yeah, like I said, there's definitely different image editing tools with different plugins. Really kind of investigate, like the capabilities, how easy or hard it is, and see if it's like something the client would want to deal with. But anyway, long story short, that's again why I'm doing this inside of a div with a background image rather than doing it inside of an image tag itself. I was going to mock this off of the what I did in the static HTML, but just for today, because we don't have too much time left, just for today, I'm going to go ahead and just set this up a little bit more normally, how I might do this with just a quick way of doing this. So what I have inside of this while is each post. So each post I'm going to put inside of a div to group them together. Now, if I put in an ID, then it's going to keep repeating that ID over and over again. But I can put in a class, and I'm going to call this class latest post. I have latest post plural up here in an ID, but latest post singular down here. So each of these posts are going to go inside of a div with the class latest post. And let's set this up so that the image is going to be on the left and the title is going to be on the right. So why don't I do this? I'm going to go ahead and create a div for the image. I'm going to give it a class called latest post image. I'm going to put that image tag. Then I'm going to create a div with the class latest post title, and that's going to have the bold tag with the actual title. So all of this exists within this while loop. The while loop is going through each and every post. I have a div with the class latest post. Inside that div, I have one div for the image and one div for the title. Just for the sake of simplicity, so I'm only dealing with one file, I'm going to do some internal style sheet, CSS. So I'm going to create a style tag. I mean, ideally this would go inside of the custom CSS that I establish. But inside the style tag, I'm going to create rules for latest posts. And rules for latest post image. And rules for latest post title. So as far as my HTML is concerned, I'm dealing with these three divs here. Latest post, which is the container, latest post image, and latest post title. In my CSS, let's set up each latest post to have a little bit of margin on it. The margin is specifying the space between each one. Let's also give it a width of about 400 pixels. And I'm going to set the overflow to auto because I'm going to float these other guys inside of it. With the latest post image, let's go ahead and do a float left. And the latest post title, I'm also going to do a float left. Let's set the width of this one to 33%, and the width of this one to 60%, with a margin left of 2%. That's what I forgot. Okay. And lastly, for the latest post image, I'm going to define the actual image tag that's inside of it and make sure the width is 100%. I'm going to throw a border around this latest post just so I'm sure I know what I'm looking at. Okay. Okay, so under latest news, we see that we have a div represented by this border here. We have the image, which is here on the left-hand side, and the title, which is here on the right-hand side. So there's lots of things that I would do to kind of customize this in order for it to look a little bit more like I want in my final design. I mean, the code that I have in my final design is fine. It just involves a little bit of extra tweaking. But the main thing is the fact that if we take a look at the inspect element here, and we take a look at inside of the div latest post, the div with the ID latest post, that is the thing which is outside of the while loop. So that's including everything, including this title for latest news. So we have div with the ID latest post. Inside of the div with the ID latest post, we have the h2 tag for the actual title. And then after the h2 tag for the title, you see two different divs with the class latest post. So this is where the repeat is happening. This is where the loop is happening. Because that div with the class latest post, singular, is only happening once in my code, but because it's inside the while, that means it's looping over and over again for each post that is labeled latest post. So for each latest post, there's two different divs, again represented by the inspect element. If we drill down on this, and we'd also see this not only with the inspect element, but also with the, if we did the view source. But we see inside of the div with the class latest post, div with the class latest post, we see two different divs, latest post image and latest post title, latest post image and latest post title. Inside of each one, we see the image tag or the bold title tag, and same thing with the image and the title down here. We see the actual image tag itself and the bold tag for the title tag here. So that's how we can go ahead and list the different posts that we have here. And again, like I said, there's lots of adjustments that could be made here in order to get a little bit closer to my design. Ideally, eventually, I'm going to go ahead and use the exact same code that I have here, which would involve putting this inside of div tags as far as for the cropping. And as long as I'm using the same classes that I set up, then whatever CSS I pulled over with the custom CSS should use the exact same things there. Now, the latest news with the slider, well, that's slightly more complicated as far as doing those slides here. But it's still kind of the same principle. We take a look at HTML code that we already know, and we replace wherever we have literal titles or literal images with the PHP that represents pulling it from that post. So most of this is code that we already know. We just have a couple of pieces here that is PHP code. But that PHP code is pulling information from the database for that specific post. So just to kind of round this out a little bit, these are my latest news posts. These are the posts that I set up the category latest news on for latest 2 title and latest 1 title. If I were to continue this down, all of this is inside of latest posts right after the h2 tag latest news. I'm going to go ahead and copy all this PHP code that I have here for the query posts, the cat3, the if, the while, and all the way down to where I'm ending the while and ending the if here. I'm copying all of this, and I put this right after featured. Now, the main thing that I need to change is just what category it's actually looking at. Instead of cat 3 for the latest news, I need to look at a different cat ID for featured. So once again, I'm going to go into where I have posts and categories. I'm going to go ahead and click on featured to actually pretend like I'm editing this, and I'm going to look in the URL where that ID actually is. In this particular case, it's 4. So I'm going to use 4 here. Let's keep going. Under editorial, I'm again going to paste all that new code there, and I'm going to change the cat to what I have for editorial. In this particular case, we have tag underscore ID is equal to 5. So the cat under editorial should be 5. And then under events, I'm going to once again paste all that code, starting with the query post all the way down to the end while end if. And I'm just changing the cat here. If I go into categories, events, go to edit that. The category in this case under tag ID is equal to 6. So now all 4 of these buckets should have their own list of posts. And it's all based on what we have as far as query post here, where I have cat 3, cat 4, cat 5, and cat 6. The rest of this is exactly the same. The way that it's doing the loop itself with the if and the while is exactly the same. The HTML code right now is exactly the same, with the exact same div structure and the exact same classes. And right now that's fine because it's all using the CSS that I have up here in order to position and size that. But let's take a look. Way too many tabs open. Here we go. Cool. So under latest news, I have these 2 latest news posts. Under featured, it's only pulling the featured posts. Under editorial, it's only pulling the editorial posts. And under events, it's only pulling the event posts. So for these individual groups, it's only pulling the post for that specific category. And again, where that category is set up is right here, where I have query post cat equals 6. Now, again, I use the exact same template, except for that, where we change the cat. It's the exact same template for each of these. Ideally, we would use different classes here. So instead of latest posts, I might say editorial post here, an editorial post image, and editorial post title. That way I can stylize this a little bit differently than I would with latest posts. The same thing for events here. Instead of the class latest post, I might say event post, an event post title, an event post image. And then I can stylize what I'm doing with events a little bit differently. Also, if we're actually looking at the goal that I'm dealing with, features and editorials look about the same, but events is actually pulling in that date. So instead of the image that I'm pulling in here, I would instead want to pull in that date. And in order to get that date, class website, first link, where it talks about the loop. Under this list, as far as what the loop can display, there is yeah, I thought it had a different one. Yeah, let's see what this pulls out. So I'm going to use this class latest post image, but I'm going to completely replace the image tag itself with the time. Now I can't just simply put it in just like this. I need to surround it with the PHP code. So I'm going to do angle bracket question mark PHP, and then I'm going to say the time, and then I'm ending it with question mark angle bracket. So again, I can't just simply copy and paste it as it is. I want to make sure that because it is PHP code, that I'm surrounding it with the PHP beginning and ending here. We can. It's a good idea to put it in semicolon. Sometimes you don't have to, but it certainly doesn't hurt. So it's good practice to do that. So yeah, it's pulling in the time. In order to pull in the date, let's see. When I click, sorry, in case you missed that, I clicked on where it says the time here. and it's giving me an article which tells just telling me just about the this particular format. So this is most likely, yeah, this is using PHP formatting as far as like how it actually pulls up the date time. Inside of the parentheses, you can put in a series of characters which represent as far as like whether it's the month or the year, things like that. So you can see like where it has the time, and you have this inside of a parentheses here. That F represents the month in this case, the J represents the day, and the Y represents the year. Don't ask. As far as the J, this is well, if you're at least kind of interested, if you Google PHP and date, one of the first things that's going to come up is not a PHP dating website, but it's going to come up with this reference that PHP uses for these different days. So where you have these different characters, F, J, and Y, this table here tells you what those characters actually equate to. So where you might say like, well, can't you just use M for month? It's actually using both a capital M as well as a lowercase m for month, where the capital M is like Jan through December, the lowercase m is a double digit for the numbers, so we're out of m's, so they went to F, which has a full text of January and December. Same thing for like why we're using J for the day. Well, we're already using a capital D and a lowercase d for Monday through Sunday, or 01 through 31 for the day. So the J is the day of the month without leaving zeros, which means 1 through 31, if you don't want the leading zero for any of that. Anyway, so this particular page, maybe I'll link this in the class website. This particular page gives you the correlation between that particular character and as far as what it's actually pulling. And as long as you know what format you want, then you can use that formula inside the parentheses for the date. For example, say I want to say, I'm going to say Jan, or I'm sorry, the abbreviated month. So I'm going to start off with M. Then I'm going to say the day, I like the leading zero, so I'm going to use lowercase d for the day. And then for the year, I can use a capital Y for 4-digit year, a lowercase y for a 2-digit year. Sure, let's go with a 2-digit year for this. So I'm going to use uppercase M, lowercase d, and then lowercase y, just to be different. And I'm going to do all of this inside of where I have the time. I'm going to put in quotes, and that was, once again, uppercase M, lowercase d, lowercase y. Now, besides those characters, I can put in whatever other characters I want in between. Because right now, if I go ahead and save that, we just have a space between them. So it's doing November 13 and 18. But typically, if we're doing a two-letter, if we're doing a, two-number year, a lot of times people will put like a single quote right before them. Like some putting a single apostrophe or quote right before the year. And if we're doing that inside the code, then yeah, it's going to put in that a single quote right here. I can put in whatever other characters I want here, whether it's commas or colons or whatever like that. And it's just simply looking for the letter characters to replace with these formats here. So I'll make sure this is linked in the class website in case you want to reference that, maybe along with this page here, so you can kind of see specifically how it works with the time.
When you put the MYJ or MDY, it put today's date in there. How would you put, so you have an event coming up, so how do you express?
Yeah. So it's pulling it from the post
Oh, from the
date.
post tag.
Now I created all these today. So where are those events? We have event 2. Let's do this event 2 title. If I set the published to another day, like I said, the published to the 9th of 2017. And I go ahead and update that. Too many tabs. Okay, here we go. So again, that event 2 title is doing November 9th of 2017 instead of today's date, which is when I actually created it. Now, if you didn't want to use this publish date, well, there's another way of setting up so that you have a separate date that would be for the event itself. But we're gonna have to get into that another time. But yeah, so this is.
Are you able to plan like future posts?
Yes. So the thing is, whenever you, I have to do this for the class website. When you are creating a post, too many times. When you are editing the publish date for a post, again, you can set the date to whatever you want. If the publish date is sometime in the future, then take a look at this this blue button. As soon as I hit OK on this, now this blue button says schedule. When you first create a brand new post, it's going to say publish. If you're updating, editing one that's already there, it's typically going to say update. But when you put in a date that's for the future, you're saying schedule. And when you put in schedule, basically that means that the post shouldn't appear until it's actually becomes public. Now, that would actually be a pretty big problem for this particular website, because basically all of these dates, I mean, you're not putting in dates of stuff that happened in the past, you're putting in dates of stuff that should be in the future. So if we're only putting in dates of stuff in the future, well, then that might be a problem, because then it might only show things that are from the past. What I'm going to get into next week, I'm just going to double check this for a second. Yeah, so, wait, no. Oh, I did that on the wrong thing. Wait a second. Wait a second. Oh, wait, that was editorial 2 title. I can use that. Yeah. So you see how editorial 2 is no longer displayed because it's set for the future. So, one thing I want to get into next week is where we have query posts. The only thing that we've dealt with so far is just putting in the category. We can actually put in other kinds of filters, specifically whether or not we're looking at published post or not. So it looks like, if this is smart, the default is it's only going to show published posts. But we're going to say for events, well, actually, we want to show posts which are not published yet. We want to show posts whether they are in the future or not. So in addition to cat equals 6, we can put in the fact that we want to show non-published posts here. We can also even put in other sorts of filters. Like, for example, maybe we don't want to sort it. Maybe we don't want to sort it by the date. Maybe we want to sort it by the title. Or maybe want to, I mean, it's a news website, so I think the date is most important. But in this particular case, maybe we want to sort it by some other means. So in addition to looking at other filters we can put in here, I also want to take a look at ways that we can put in additional fields that are not immediately available in the post. So in the post, we can put in a title, we can put in content, we can put in a published date, we can put in categories, we can put in tags, we can put in an image. Say that we want to add in other fields. Say that, like, we put in a field for a time, or, you know, with an event, maybe like there's a start time and an end time. maybe with a particular news article. There's just other information, other fields we want to put in. So I want to get into how we would potentially do that at another time. So hopefully we'll get into that next week. By the way, I don't know if you saw the email from the department, the CE department. I made a mistake. I said that I thought they canceled classes for Tuesdays on Thanksgiving week, but the classes are canceled for the Wednesdays, Wednesday through Friday. Or I'm sorry, Wednesday night through Friday night. So the class is still on for Tuesday night, but obviously not for Thursday night of next week. So we are still going to be here for next Tuesday, but the Thursday is not going to be a normal time. But that's when we're doing remote sessions anyway. I'll probably be eating dinner, so I might not be available over email. But as always, feel free to email me outside of normal hours if you need help with anything.
Will there be time on
But yeah.
Tuesday to work on it?
Sure, I can set up some time. There's still some other things I really want to go over, and we still have a couple more weeks until the end. I did want to. So the last class is the 4th. What does it say right? Yeah. The last class is the last lecture is the 4th, and the 6th we're basically just going to spend the time showing off what we have for the website. So the final website is going to be due the 6th. So the 4th is going to be the last lecture. I definitely want to make the 4th a day where we're just working on class, no matter what. I was also thinking about it for the 27th, but there's still some other things I really kind of wanted to go over. So we'll definitely leave time towards the end to go over, or to lose some time for working in class. But I want to make sure you guys are getting your money's worth as far as the lectures and everything. So, as always, if you have technical questions, I'm available over email with that stuff. As I said, it's easiest if I can take a look at your files. So when it comes to if you have questions about your static HTML, like if there's something that's not specific to WordPress, like for example, like anything that has to do with mobile compatibility, anything like that, if you want to send me your static HTML pages, that's fine. If you want me to if you want me to take a look at anything that has to do with your WordPress, well, I'm going to need to take a look at the PHP files. And just linking to your website itself, unfortunately, is not good enough, because as you can see, you can't see the PHP files. So what you're going to have to do, if you want to send me, like, hey, Jonathan, I'm having trouble with something that's going on in my theme, inside my header or footer or whatever like that, what you're going to end up doing is basically zipping all of your files for your. I mean, I only need the files that you actually edited, so you couldn't just send me. You could just send me a zip of those. But I don't mind if you want to zip up the whole thing too, if that's easier for you, and I can get a context of if you have any extra JavaScript or images, anything like that.
Well, if we
get
upload it, can't you pull it off of our?
So if you upload it to Media Temple, yes, I could potentially log into your Media Temple account if you haven't changed your path. Wait, do I have your path? Yeah.
Well,
if you
they
haven't
gave
changed,
me mine in January,
okay.
whenever
If you haven't changed your passwords, then yeah, I guess I could log into your accounts because I should have the passwords that you guys originally set up with. So yeah, I guess that's
we'll
true.
find a way to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely email me. Let me know like what specifically the issue is that you're trying to deal with, and if I can't find the files that I need to take a look at, I'll email you back and basically ask you for that.
Okay.
So yeah.
So okay.
So like I said, next week we're gonna continue with some more options with this, and hopefully you're able to kind of see at least the possibilities of like how to start to convert what you're doing with your static HTML into this. Unfortunately, I mean, it's going to be different for everybody. So while I could step you through how I'm doing mine, I mean, with yours, it's going to be a little bit different. So the thing is, the main thing to kind of pay attention to are what these placeholders are. So for example, like, well, this is how we're pulling up the time. This is how we're pulling up the title. And this is how we're doing a loop of all that information. And here's how we're pulling up the category. Anything else you see as HTML is kind of arbitrary and should reflect your design and not mine. So all this HTML code is slightly irrelevant.
Example.
Yeah, but you want to pay attention to like how to actually pull this information from the databases. So hopefully you're getting at least a little bit of that. But we'll do some review next week as well as go over some new stuff. And as always, this Thursday, if you want help during that specific hour, I'll definitely be available online during that hour. But as always, feel free to email me outside of normal class times too, to ask me questions about stuff. But cool. That is it for today.